To look for in properties, planning permission edition. If you are going down the route of doing any sort of planning permission, then there are things that you need to consider first before you even buy a property on that street. The first is something called precedent. It's about making sure that a neighbour or someone on your side of the street has already done the work that you are intending to do. Without precedent being set, then it's going to be a lot harder of a job trying to get the council to agree to give you any sort of major developments that you want to do on that road. It could be because it's a conservation area, it could be because the neighbours have lived in this area for so long, they haven't seen any major design changes at all to any houses, and they're going to contest about it hugely. So you want to make sure that firstly you have precedent set on the street. That could be a loft conversion, it could be an extension, it could be whatever it is. So make sure you look on Google Earth, have a look at any of the nearby properties to see if they have already done what you are intending to do to the house. This also includes outlandish designs. We initially tried to go for, on our planning permission, a very different frontage for the house, and unfortunately it didn't fit within the aesthetics of the area, so they told us that we couldn't have the front but we could have everything else. Because of that, we had to change the design. That wasn't the be all end all. We would have liked to have had the design that we liked, but ultimately make sure that if you're going for anything outlandish and you're changing the facade of the house, make sure that you find a house nearby or something very similar to your design, so that way you know you've got something to back up in an argument should the council say no. As well as the council, you have parish councils. These people are self-nominated, they put themselves into a little group and then they talk about what it is that you want to do to the property and how it's going to change the area. They usually have a very heavy say and a good influence on the council, but they cannot decide for the council. The council will look upon the parish to see if there's anything that you're doing they're not too familiar with, because the council will have different people that work for them that may not be familiar with the area, they may not live in the area. The people who work for the parish councils tend to live in the area. They specifically have to be there to be able to make any decisions or contributions towards the design or the look of the village or the location that you want to buy in. The parish council can absolutely have say as to whether they like your design or don't like your design. If they say they don't like your design, the council can still say yes. In most cases, the council will look to them for guidance, but they don't have to categorically use what the parish say. In most cases, though, you're going to have to keep the parish sweet so that you're in a position to be able to do what it is that you want to do. A party wall agreement. This is an agreement that you need to have with your neighbour before you do any digging. So if you are looking to extend your property and you are relatively close to a neighbouring property, especially if you're semi-detached or even if you are detached, you have to be within a particular radius away from the neighbouring property so that you can lay the foundations that's needed to support the structure of design that you want to do. And to make sure that you do that, you have to have something called a party wall agreement, which basically means your neighbour has to confirm that they're happy of what you're going to be doing, what you're going to be building, and the design as well. So make sure you keep your neighbour happy at the same time. Do you need an architect? Not in all cases, but it is highly advised. You will pay for what you get with an architect. But if you are already aware of the type of design that you want, you've seen it already on the street, precedent has already been set, then you probably don't need an architect. You could just go to a planning officer. Now you can do this directly if you want with the council. It is relatively straightforward, but it's a lot of paperwork. Whereas if you go to a planning officer, they do it all for you. So it depends if you have the additional cash. It is worth the money. But if you are in a position where you're not entirely familiar with the area, you would like the idea of a design put in place, then the architect can communicate with the planning officer and do everything for you in one fell swoop for a nominated fee and a cost, but it will make sure it be done properly and they will contest it for you and keep throwing it back to the council to get you over the line and approved. Having said all of that, you also have something called permitted development. This means that if precedent has already been set on the street and there has already been a structure, a design that's already been done, and you like the idea of doing something very, very similar, in most cases the council have already approved it generically across that region. And if that is the case, that falls under the parameters of permitted development, which means the only thing you need to be paying attention to is building regulations. These people need to make sure that they visit the property, they visit the site to make sure the building is done in a particular way. If they don't build the design in line with building regulations, the council can make you take it down, and lenders will not borrow on it as well. So make sure that if you go down the route of permitted development where you don't use an architect, you don't use a planning officer, make sure you still have at least a building regulator, someone who stops by regularly to make sure that the materials being used are done in the right sort of way, to make sure everything is signed off so that you can still get a mortgage loan on the property.